Hello and welcome to the Media Club. I'm your host, Matt Deacon. In the club today, the Observer deal is done and now becomes part of Tortoise. Charlotte Tobitt of Press Gazette is here to tell us what happens next. Also on the programme, BBC Radio faces pushback from Ofcom over its DAB expansion plans. And columnist Caroline Frost ponders what we have to look forward to in TV in 2025. All that, plus all the gossip from the British Journalism Awards, the continued de-Wallacing of TV, and in the media quiz we brush up those CVs. That's all coming up in this edition of the Media Club. Come on in. So welcome back to the Media Club. Before we get into the big stories this week, Caroline, you write for the Radio Times and Deadline, amongst others. Who would you pick to be a new member of the Media Club this week?
Hello. Well, I'm hoping, Matt, that you will be able to tell me who this person is, or if we can do a call out, because I really feel like the finger needs to come down and pluck this person from obscurity and reward them. It is whoever at the BBC had the foresight 6 months ago to book Chris McCausland to enter Strictly Come Dancing, because we know that Strictly was somewhat flagging. It was not on its tippy toes on the dance floor. It was on its feet. It was crawling across the dance floor, hoping that a bunch of bad stories would go away. And I said at the time, what this needs is some good news stories to come with the new series. It's the 20th year. It's all important. It's one of the BBC's biggest flagship brands. I mean, to mention in dispatches Pete Wicks and his PVC trousers. Nevertheless, I think if one person saved Strictly, it was Chris McCausland. So I would like to nominate whoever that hitherto unflagged, unpraised, unrewarded person in the BBC production team had that foresight to make that decision.
From the Strictly booking team. I mean, often we forget, and maybe listeners don't so much, but the casting of shows and reality shows, how essential it is for their success.
Absolutely key. It will fly or fall by those booking decisions and by the mix. And what we saw this year, I mean, I went along and did the press for Strictly as Elstree at the beginning of the series, and you could tell they'd all been PR'd into a paper bag. How are you feeling about the series? Well, the good thing is it's entertainment. Yes, everyone said through gritted teeth. So you did see it though. The competitiveness was there. There was some wonderful dancing, but at the other end of the leaderboard, we had some great entertainers. So whatever they did to mix it up this year, it was the right formula.
Okay, booking team, you can come and join. And Charlotte from Press Gazette, hello, how are you?
Hello, Matt. Very well.
And who would you like to add into the club this week?
I've decided to mention a few kind of really great women journalists.
Okay. As it's Christmas,
exactly.
You can have some multiple names.
Thank you. Very generous. So just some appointments made in the past week. So Forbes is getting its first female CEO in its history, Sherry Phillips. She's been Chief Revenue Officer and she's spoken at some of our events and she's really brilliant. And I think Forbes are doing kind of really interesting things to become sustainable, as all news media businesses need to be doing right now. The Mirror have appointed Lizzie Buchan as political editor. She has been doing it interim, but she's obviously proved herself, and I think it's hopefully she'll kind of follow in the footsteps of Pippa Crerar, who did amazing things at the Mirror, obviously now at the Guardian, but it's really great to keep a kind of female political editor there. And then I know we're going to mention more, but just because it fits with the segue, the Observer's next editor, Lucy Rock, will be looking after its print edition once it's at Tortoise.
Well, they are all worthy people to join the club. Let's stay on the Observer. So kind of news this week that the deal's been done. It's been acquired by James Harding's Tortoise Media, which we talked a lot about on the show. And Charlotte, we're going to expect the first edition in the spring with Lucy Rock editing that. What else do we know about what's going on?
There are still kind of questions about who all the investors are. We know a couple kind of philanthropic and think tank type vibe, someone who has invested in like Puck, for example, but people are still asking questions about who the rest of it is. With the news that the deal's been confirmed, staff have been allowed to start applying for voluntary redundancy if they don't want to move to Tortoise. And an interesting other detail is even once they've moved over, they've agreed it so that they'll still be able to apply for internal Guardian roles and kind of get out within 18 months of leaving. So they've obviously done all of that to placate staff who are still really not happy and didn't like the way that the process was done, especially the fact that it was initially agreed by the Scot Trust while they were undertaking their first strike. But the fact that they then did a second 48-hour strike, even though it was pretty much nailed on at that point, just shows the strength of feeling. But we're starting to get a flavour of what it's actually going to look like in terms of, they're paywalled daily digital with arts, business, all of this still, as well as that kind of core print edition. So it's nice that they're because you would think, oh, maybe that would be an easy cost saving immediately, but no, it is built around keeping the print, which is nice.
Caroline.
Charlotte, can you tell me why those Observer journalists are so unhappy about the prospect of working for Tortoise?
So partly it's just that other people have expressed an interest in buying the Observer.
I know they were unhappy about the process.
Yeah.
But what is it about Tortoise that is upsetting and destabilising them?
It's partly the fact that it's a relatively new startup still, whereas obviously under the Guardian Media Group banner, they've had a lot of job security, like literally an agreement for no compulsory redundancies, things like that. And I think they feel like their job security is going to go down the pan, which is why they've obviously done a lot of those agreements. And then they're like, well, why couldn't a lot of this have happened at the they're saying that the Observer's not financially sustainable how it is, and they're like, well, why couldn't we have done some of this? We're in a really great position. We've got the Scot Trust Endowment Fund. We had such an opportunity, and it's Tortoise. Yes, it's got these investors. Some of them still a mystery, but they do have investors. But compared to the endowment fund, it's much smaller, and it's still loss making from the most recent accounts we know, and the turnover is much smaller. So it's kind of largely about all of that security and feeling whether it's a good sustainable business.
Talking to some of the journalists at the beginning, they felt that they could probably derail this, and it's all happened perhaps quicker than a lot of people at King's Place thought. Do you think there'll be any further issues before we get to the spring, or do you think deal is done, there will be a Tortoise Observer launching no matter what?
Yeah, if I had to bet, I would bet that it's happening now.
Interesting what they do, sort of the analogue, more print edition of the paper versus the digital side of it. I mean, Caroline, the Observer's never really had its own digital home. A lot of that was, it was some tubes into the Guardian. There's potentially a lot of opportunity, but also there will be competition for the Guardian in some of this space as well.
Well, we do know that historically across tabloids and broadsheets, sometimes the most competitive bun fights for stories are between the weekly and the weekend titles. I mean, I guess this is a bigger division of church and state. It's definitely unsettling. It's interesting what Charlotte was saying about them being so unhappy about the prospect of going somewhere with presumably deep, deep pockets. Would it be like somebody working at the BBC and then being told that Apple wanted to scoop them up? I'm sure lots of people wouldn't mind that in TV world.
I guess they think that the Guardian, they're actually the ones that have all the money, and like Tortoise, it's the new startup.
It's all a bit unknown, isn't it?
They're not sure. I mean, they're probably more fleet of foot than obviously the Guardian, but the Guardian's been pretty fleet of foot with the deal.
It has, but I have to say I've never seen the word Observer used so much as in the last fortnight. So if what they're lacking is publicity and hype and scrutiny and interest, suddenly they've got everything they could wish for.
Charlotte, I was thinking, could the Guardian Saturday edition become a weekend edition against the Observer on a Sunday? Or do you think they've thought about that and it's ruled out in the agreement?
No, I think it could, and
it'd be sensible to do a bit like the FT's done.
I mean the FT and the I, they both have really strong Saturday editions. I mean, the Guardian could do that. It would be better than, they wouldn't have to expand it too much. They already have a good Saturday edition, so you could just slightly rebrand that, and then it's not too much more competition, I would say, than the Saturday edition already is. It's interesting because that was one of the things that was kind of suggested, like could that be an option to keep the Observer going under the current ownership to do it as kind of this whole weekend edition. But no, but yeah, I think that's something like that.
A lot of things on the table. Wallace news. Grace Dent is to replace Gregg Wallace on new episodes of Celebrity Masterchef, the BBC's announced. Caroline, broadcasters are making plans for a sort of Wallace-free future. There's quite a lot of scheduling issues to resolve. There's a lot of output.
We must spare a thought for not just the commissioning people who've had to cut and dice and slice all of those episodes just of this last series. They are crawling to the end of this series. I mean, he's turning up, but very much in the background. The Christmas specials, they're not even in the kitchen anymore. They've been put straight in the bin. And then, of course, as you say, Grace Dent is coming along. I mean, the BBC will be crossing everything for a seamless transition because it's such an important, enormous brand.
Is she a good choice?
I think she's an obvious choice. Safe pair of hands. I think being a woman was perhaps very key to one of the decision-making processes. Certainly, she's done her stripes. She's a Guardian food critic. She's an author. She's been on the show many, many times. I think if anybody was going to pass the ball and it to continue very much in the direction of travel, it would be Grace Dent. But very interesting. I mean, yes, those poor iPlayer people. The iPlayer is suddenly like a bare cupboard after Christmas with no Gregg Wallace in it, no Jay Blades, no Hugh Edwards, no Jermaine Jenas. I mean, it does become a case of, will the last male BBC presenter please turn off the lights?
And that's not all bad, is it? But the new civilian MasterChef is wrapping filming this week. I mean, if you've been in the series or any of these series as a contestant, you must be thinking, oh, my big chance has maybe evaporated.
This is the great paradox, isn't it? Is that these shows, they're built on the strengths, or as we found, weaknesses of one or two people. But of course, it's an enormous ecosystem that they preside over. And this is why to me, it's so mortifying, because you do get somebody like Gregg Wallace, not just Gregg Wallace, he's not alone. We know the catalogue is now littered with people who have proven to have feet of clay on all channels, not just the BBC. And the only thing they have to do, when you've got hard-working researchers, producers, journalists, all doing the hard yards, ordering the coffee, ordering the taxi, doing the research, prepping the guests, all these people are paid sometimes 10 times the amount of those hardworking anonymous people next to them, is to be presentable, amenable to contact with audiences. They're being paid to have great personalities and good characters, and some of them can't even manage that. And I just think the BBC must learn from this. We know that Tim Davie has shuffled off the word talent. I mean, often after many, many errant horses have bolted. However, he has done it, and I think there's a recognition there that perhaps we don't know what causes it. Do these people start out as divas with pretensions, or does the act of having too much attention, too much love in the makeup room turn them into monsters? We don't know, but what we can control is not paying them this ridiculous amount of licence fee payers' money, so that at least we know if that is the problem, we can stem that flow at birth.
But isn't the big issue that it's so hard to establish any TV shows now, that everyone doubles down on bankable talent? Does it make them worse?
Well, it makes them very aware of their currency, for sure, and especially when you have somebody like Gregg Wallace, who is reaching audiences that other presenters can't reach.
Yes.
I mean, he has been identified as having that X factor with different parts of the audience. We traditionally, the BBC is always told it's middle class producers making TV for middle class audiences, and Gregg Wallace is one of the few people that cut through that, hence his power, hence his status. But yes, it's a tough one. I mean, I think that they should just learn from the Dalai Lama and just consult the tea leaves and decide who doesn't want to be a TV presenter and go and recruit them. Yeah.
Okay, just as we've been recording, some news that the BBC are going to have to pause their rollout of some new radio stations on DAB whilst Ofcom launches a 6-month investigation. So, as a bit of a recap, BBC have launched Radio 1 Anthems and Radio 3 Unwind on BBC Sounds. They'd like to launch them on DAB Digital Radio and add a BBC 2, Radio 2 spin-off to that as well. Commercial Radio not very happy about a Radio 2 spin-off. Also not happy about extending 5 Live Sports Extra, Talk Sport, particularly grumpy about that. I mean, Charlotte, this is kind of a win for commercial radio. Keep the BBC in their box.
Yeah, definitely. And it's very similar to me to kind of that argument between commercial local news organisations and the BBC as well. But so that strikes me. But I mean, Matt, you've summed it up for us, but what's your take? Radio is really your thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not good news for the BBC. I think they hoped they'd get this through, or some of it through, a sort of 6-month wait. And Ofcom, you sort of read between the lines. Ofcom have sort of said a couple of times, we're not really sure about some of this, particularly the 2 and the 5 Live stuff. I think the BBC had an opportunity to sort of wrest the Radio 2 spin-off, even though they really want it. And they might have got through all the other stuff.
But isn't it a bigger question, a sort of existential question, though, of whether you applaud the BBC's huge audience reach, grasp success in one area of that huge corporation, or whether you say, oh, it's now too successful in that area. So it kind of, it gets to a point, it's like one of those coin machines where it's not allowed to tip over, because we saw things like the website, didn't we? So the food website, everything gets stymied as soon as it gets to a point. So when it doesn't do well with programmes and ratings fall, we say, why should we pay our licence fee? And then when it does do something spectacularly well, they say, oh no, that's bad for competition.
Too popular.
Yeah, so how does it proceed?
I think it's difficult. And also, Ofcom and the government asked the BBC to do certain things. So one of the things Ofcom have really talked to BBC and the radio team about is looking at audiences that are C2DEs,
Gregg
appeal
Wallace
to them, the Gregg Wallace zone, and more diverse audiences too. And one of the things they've identified with some of these channels is they are a bit more commercial-like, but that's actually because those demographic groups like what commercial radio does. So it's sort of like, well, we can't keep doing very high-end public service to reach that audience, so we need to change our act a little bit. So you feel kind of bad about it at that end. Though the other bit is, and I talked to some people at the BBC, they are sort of jealous of what commercial radio's achieved with all of its spin-offs and a lot of success, and ratings have gone very much in commercial radio's favour. And like there's always a bit of professional jealousy for everybody.
And they've gone federal, haven't they? I mean, they had a bunch of local franchises, and suddenly every breakfast commercial radio station across the land was suddenly being hosted by Amanda Holden and Jamie Theakston.
Or the combo of them together, yes.
So they went federal.
Yeah.
And it's now, and the BBC, as Charlotte was saying, the local radio battle is ever being lost by the BBC. I think there is a centralisation in all the different areas. Yeah,
and I think there's people always look over the fence a little bit. I mean, BBC Local Radio has a lot of regionalised content in now as well. And again, the great way the BBC works, the local radio people come from the news division and the radio people come from the audio radio division. And there isn't maybe as much discussion as you would expect between them. And so investing in all these great new national spin-offs while cutting the local talent may well be the correct thing to do, but it's not great comms, is it, Charlotte?
No, absolutely. And for the BBC, that is really crucial. Of any of these broadcasters, newspapers, whatever that we talk about, the BBC is the one that needs to get the comms right.
But also, from the local newspaper side, there's an interesting battle with the BBC and what it does on its website.
Yeah.
Obviously, they pay for the local democracy scheme, which funds a lot of content on commercial newspapers. So it's an odd merry-go-round combination of activities.
Yeah, and I mean, so Ofcom a couple of weeks ago basically said that the BBC could be causing a hindrance or could in future cause a hindrance, and it is a headwind for commercial local news websites because of the stuff it's been doing, where it's been moving away from local radio towards its online local journalism. So as I say, it's a similar kind of dynamic, and publishers like Reach and NewsQuest was so happy about the fact that that Ofcom had said this. It was kind of they've been years have been saying, the BBC's on our turf and it's making our life hard, and is this within its remit? And Ofcom didn't go all the way and say, yeah, you're completely right, but it's kind of given a hint that it's much more open to that way of looking at it.
So I think it's going to be an interesting year for Ofcom next year. GB News stuff is coming up, all this BBC activity. I think a lot of people regarded them as having not necessarily taken their eye off their ball, but maybe gone quite calm. Maybe it was in a Tory government. But I think they're going to be a big part of the story next year. Speaking of 2025, more on that in a bit, plus some more media news. We'll see you in a sec.
Hello Media Club listeners, Patrick here from Podcast Discovery, the podcast marketing company, where this week we've been thinking about the 3 things every single podcaster should be asking themselves. You should know why you're making your podcast, what problem you're solving with your podcast, and whether you're reaching your ideal listeners. If you don't have an easy answer to these things, ask yourself why, or ask us. To find out more about what we can do for your podcast marketing, head to podcastdiscovery.com. That's podcastdiscovery.com.
With 2025 right around the corner, there's no better time to hit refresh on your podcast. Whether you're already recording or planning to start your show in the new year, now's the time to take your content to the next level. And what better way to kick things off than by getting organised and lining up some recording sessions here at Podshop Studios. And that's just where we record our show each week. Recording in a professional studio means no hassle when you show up. Everything's ready to go, so you can focus on creating episodes that your listeners love. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned pro, Podshop Studios ensures top quality recordings every time. And to help you start the new year strong, you can get 25% off your first booking. Just use the code MEDIACLUB at podshoponline.co.uk. That's podshoponline.co.uk. You'll thank us later. Welcome back. Here are some other news stories occupying space rent-free in Media Club's members' heads. King Charles has given CBEs to Ted Sarandos and Shonda Rhimes for their contributions to the creative industry at a ceremony on Sunday, praising Netflix for employing 30,000 British cast and crew, with currently more than 100 productions active in the UK. The government has issued a consultation on AI and how it's trained on copyrighted material. It wants an exception to copyright law for AI training, while allowing rights holders to opt out or reserve the option to charge for the privilege. The deadline for submissions is the 25th of February. And David Montgomery's company National World has been taken over by Media Concierge. The new owners of the Yorkshire Post and the Scotsman have said they have no plans for material job reductions in editorial or production, though some duplicate backroom staff positions will go. Charlotte, what do we know about Media Concierge?
We haven't covered them a load before, to be honest. They have some local newspapers in Ireland, for example, the Donegal Democrat and the Limerick Leader.
Love some alliteration. Yeah,
more of that, please. And they also have a marketing business. So, these are kind of different subsidiaries. And they were one of National World's original backers when David Montgomery kind of bought the previous JPI media titles, but have since kind of seemingly had a falling out with him, and then and that's how all of this has unfolded. But I think it's similar to the Observer. This has all happened quite quick, even more quickly. But as you say, they've made the right initial noises regarding what they want in terms of what the company should do. David Montgomery had tried to make it slightly more national. For example, they'd launched a website called National World as well as the existing local ones. But Media Concierge and its boss Malcolm Denmark is saying we think the local here is what's important. So that'll be interesting to see what they do.
And this week it was the British Journalism Awards. Were you partying there?
Sort of. It's Press Gazette's big night of the year, and usually what happens is after we've given out all the awards, I have to chase down some of the winners for interviews. Right. So I can't really. I'm on the clock, so I'm not
on the clock, not on the booze.
Exactly.
Right. And big winners.
Yes, so News Provider of the Year was Channel 4 News. It's quite an unusual category, the whole awards are, to be honest, because most journalism awards are kind of newspapers or broadcasters, and this one's or online, but this one's everything. And so Channel 4 News kind of got that big one for kind of its reporting from Gaza, its work with Palestinian journalists there, stuff it did on the post office, its undercover investigation on the reform campaign in Clacton, stuff like that. The Sun took the investigation and scoop awards for its Hugh Edwards stuff, even though it obviously started last year. They did still lead on it this year, and so it kind of sometimes when it falls into the following year, you've got to accept that it was a slightly longer term thing. Similarly, campaign of the year went to Computer Weekly for the post office stuff, and obviously that's been a really long running thing that they've been leading on. And the other big public interest thing of the year, the infected blood scandal, helped Caroline Wheeler of the Sunday Times get Journalist of the Year. She's done other stuff as well, but it was in particular recognition for her kind of long-term work for the Sunday Times and other newspapers on helping that inquiry happen and the compensation end up getting awarded.
Well, some great winners. And also this week, Press Gazette has done a thing that you've covered a lot of. You've put up a registration wall.
Yes, it's happened. We've heard so many other people talk about it, and we thought, we can't deny, especially where you're targeting a particular industry, particular specialism, there are people that will hopefully pay for it eventually. That's not a secret. We said in our announcement, at some point we hope to introduce a modest charge, but we're kind of easing people in. We're talking openly about how some of our revenue comes from kind of sponsorships, and it helps us a lot if we know who our readers are.
Yes.
And that's, as you say, something we've been reporting so much. If you know who your most loyal and core users are in particular, there's just a lot more you can do with them, both in terms of serving them great reporting and the commercial side of it as well.
Is it one of those things where you have conducted so many interviews where people have explained all of that and the light bulb finally just went on?
Yeah, you're like, okay, I can't deny this any longer. Obviously we should be doing this. And we've literally had quite high senior people in the media say, I'd pay for Press Gazette. So and you just hope you slowly start to work out that enough people hopefully feel that way.
And Caroline, your day job at the Radio Times, very much podcast focused.
Podcast and column, so a bit of old school, bit of new school.
How's the podcast been going?
Great. Really good fun. We've rebranded it recently and it's got some different segments. I mean, I think there's a recognition that the Radio Times superpower is its listings, its choices, its curation, its presentation of all things TV and radio. So that is very much in the mix. But there's also a reader's letter, because the post bag is still overflowing with people. Why is it
cool part of the mag as well?
Very cool part of the mag. So I want to celebrate that, and I pluck the best, and we have all sorts. I love the reader's letter, and that's my favourite part of the podcast. The second favourite is something we're calling Frostbite, would you believe, which is when I have my say on something zeitgeisty in the week's TV and radio news.
Excellent. Well, speaking of TV, what's coming up in 2025? What have you got your eye on? Or which should we have our eyes ready?
So I'll give you three, not in no particular order. So we have New Year's Day, Harlan Coben on Netflix doing what he now does best. I mean, this man obviously has already proved himself in one media, selling millions and millions of books. Netflix have scooped him up, and now he's Harlan Coben's ...
Right.
And we saw that to great effect last New Year's Day. It's obviously that binge moment. Everyone's had enough of the collective viewing experience, valuable though it is. But clearly, New Year's Day is one for in the bedroom, on your phone, on your iPad. Enough of the family already. I'm going to watch 8 episodes. And in last year's case, it was Fool Me Once, which did the numbers. And this year, they're hoping that he will pull off the same magic trick with something called Missing You, which is, inspired by John Waite's 80s pop rock track.
Oh, is there a lovely kitchen in it?
There's always a lovely kitchen. Yes, there's a love affair. I mean, what he does so successfully in his books and now on TV is that he's got that sort of Dickensian knack of keeping us tuning in just for one more. Just turn that page in the books, click on the next one on the streamer. But he also has that emotional belly at the heart of all of his stories, which I think is what makes him so special. I mean, I'm an enormous fan, and he's a lovely man as well.
Okay,
so I don't begrudge him.
Add to list for that one.
So Harlan Coben's Missing You. we have something now. Some people have said to me this is a bit niche. Tell me what you think. This is James Graham, of course, political dramatist of this era. He's turned his attention to a 1989 interview between Brian Walden of Weekend World and Margaret Thatcher. And if I tell you, so James Graham on writing duties, Steve Coogan playing Brian Walden, and Harriet Walter sort of channeling a bit of Succession and a bit of other imperious madams as Margaret Thatcher, and it really is just, it's their relationship. They started out as friends.
They were friends before,
they were friends.
weren't they? Yes.
He helped her. She thought she had an ally in her corner, which she probably did for a long time, but then, as we've talked about, when people turn, they turn, and come 1989, she thought she was in safe hands with this, what she hoped was a sort of rescue piece, and it turned out not to be the case. So it's quite a contained piece. You know, there's not much action, no car chases. Perhaps one for the politicos.
What channel? Do you want
Channel 4.
Oh, 4. Okay.
Yes, new commissioner there, and this is one of his first picks, so I hope that goes well. Finally, I want to celebrate the return, at last, Bergerac.
Ah, yes.
It's back, the reboot. Now, there was all this talk of turning Bergerac into Mrs. Bergerac. That hasn't happened. Instead, we've got a brand new Bergerac. We've got Damien Maloney stepping into Bergerac's shoes on the island of Jersey.
They haven't moved it to Mallorca or anything.
No, it's still Jersey. I mean, gosh, probably with a new theme tune, sadly. I hope there's what they did with Van der Valk, which is have a sort of little refrain for the old ones, you know, for us oldies tuning in. But it's also Charlie Hungerford, if you remember him, Terence Alexander. Charlie is now a woman, so I don't know how that fits in with the Cigar and the Gentleman's Club, played by Zoe Wanamaker. So I think they're going to give it a good crack, and obviously the purists will be watching very closely.
And where's that going to be broadcast?
You drama.
Yes, so it's quite a big commission.
It's a massive commission, but I think this is why, as with so many other examples, we're seeing, if in doubt, grab a bit of very familiar intellectual property and then give it some 2024, 2025 twists.
Yes, no, I think it'll probably go quite well. It's a good cast. That's a good cast
for sure.
too. Charlotte, what's been your TV hit of the year? What have you been watching at home?
I'll tell you my two favourites, which does show me as a bit of a rom-com lover. One, I thought the one-day adaptation of David Nichols's book was just done so well. Absolutely loved it. From the soundtrack to the cast to everything. And then Nobody Wants This, the Adam Brody, Kristen Bell thing on Netflix recently, another kind of rom-com vibe, but really fun. He went viral afterwards for being the, hot rabbi. But I think that is a really rare case of me watching all of it in one day.
Okay, proper binge watch.
Loved it, yeah. I would do it again.
We've just been watching Black Doves.
Oh yes,
at home.
A little bit derivative.
I enjoyed it.
Good.
Maybe that's what I like. Just watching the
familiar
old stuff.
Spies. There's a lot of spying going on TV at the moment.
I do love a bit of spy action. The Agency. We've also started watching that US series again.
More spies.
Spies, half set in London. It's a CIA, but set in London. They like a bit of US UK crossover, don't they?
We love our espionage. When you think even The Diplomat, massive great hit for Netflix.
Yeah.
Series 2's just been and gone. Again, her background is it all comes from, I think, the great surprise success of Homeland. I think people got this fresh interest in what was possible, because Spies, they kind of belong to the John le Carré era. It was all a bit kind of Cold War, wasn't it? But there's definitely a new wave of it.
There's a lot of funky spies. Right, okay, time for the media quiz. Let's see how much attention you've been paying to the media news this week. This week's quiz is entitled Transferable Skills. 'Tis the season to dust up the CV and think about new horizons, but which media brands or intellectual property is making the leap into a new medium or format? Best of three. Buzz in if you know the answer. So Charlotte, you will say
Charlotte.
And Caroline, you will say
Caroline.
Let's play Transferable Skills. Question number 1. Which children's series is to have a full-length feature spin-off?
Caroline?
Yes.
Is this Miss Bluey?
It is. That's
oh my
correct.
goodness. So this is exciting because I don't watch any children's TV, thankfully, but I have great, intelligent friends who are parents, and they tell me that Bluey is the one show that they are very happy to both sit their children in front of, but also sit in front of themselves. I mean, this has been a phenomenon. This is a co-production. The BBC has got a big part in this. The Australian Broadcasting Corporation got a big part of this. Is Ludo production company. It's gone from strength to strength. It's one of Netflix's biggest hits, I think.
Yes, so and in America, Disney big partner in it too.
I mean, this is it's gorgeous.
Done hugely well. Also news this week from the creator Joe Brumm. Charlotte, do you know what he's been saying? Well, he's been saying that he's off. He's going to do the movie, but he's not doing series 4. So there's been 3 series of Bluey so far. So in a typical Daily Mail headline, viewers are shocked that Joe Brumm is off. I'm not sure they are really. But interesting. So they're still going to carry on a bit with the TV as they move towards a movie. Distributed by BBC Studios and Disney, which I guess will make a few quid for the BBC as well.
I imagine it will.
Okay, question number 2. Which sitcom ensemble is to be a Zoo Radio breakfast show?
This is Gavin and Stacey.
Yes.
Taking over the Radio 2 breakfast show. Now, this is interesting because obviously Zoe Ball's off. Scott Mills is shortly to slip into the chair. But in the meantime, this is, I think, absolute proof of just how many balls in one big comedy Christmas Day basket the BBC are placing a lot of welly into the Gavin and Stacey finale, aren't they?
Already Gavin and Stacey has a good chance of being by far the biggest hit of Christmas, but they're not leaving any stone unturned to make sure it's pro-made.
I mean, they've been on the advertising, they've had the trailers, they were part of the Strictly final. There's a lot of synergy going on in that BBC spaceship, and Gavin and Stacey, it's all about propelling everybody to 9 p.m. on BBC One on Christmas Day.
And I think the whole cast are going to be on. I don't know how much is live and pre-recorded, but I think the whole cast of the show are going to be on.
Quite fun.
Very
Perfect
good.
demographic.
Are you going to watch Gavin and Stacey on Christmas Day? Or an iPlayer catch-up?
No, Christmas Day. We're going to be at my husband's family and his sister, shout out. She is her favourite programme ever. So since we'll be there, there's no way we can't watch it.
Yeah. No,
I'm going to be watching exactly the same time. BBC 2, there's a brand new arena from Roger Moore with Love. That's getting my eyeballs.
Excellent. Right, question number 3. A slightly more tenuous one here. Which comedian is to move from zoology to biology? So,
can you give us a clue?
A comedian who had a Netflix show, British comedian, heritage comedian, had some trouble with a bee, and now he's going to be having trouble with
a child,
a baby. So this is Rowan Atkinson, whose Netflix sequel to Man vs. Bee is Man vs. Baby. Did you either of you see Man vs. Bee?
I did see Man vs. Bee. I mean,
are you even aware of Man vs. Bee?
No, honestly, I was so baffled by everything in that question.
He's extraordinary, isn't he? Because for the entire 80s and early 90s, he was just Mr. Primetime comedy. Just couldn't fail. And with Blackadder and everything. And then off he went to drive his cars. And I think he's been quite quiet, but like so many other people, he's come back via Netflix. And I mean, I'm gratified for him because he does present a unique offering in the entertainment ecosystem. When you think of Mr. Bean, I remember once being in China and I went to visit the Terracotta Warriors and I was on the bus on the way back, and you would think that you would have escaped quite a lot of Western culture, and I had, except that there was a screen on this bus and there was Mr. Bean. And I thought, he gets around.
Well, sort of like non-verbal shows.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always pretty lucrative for a Netflix, something you can very much deploy in lots of markets.
Oh, you don't even have to pay localization money, do you? Nobody has to audio describe. Nobody has to do fresh subtitles, overdubbing, any of that. You just turn up with the original tape and off you go. Yes.
Well, congratulations. That makes Caroline our winner. As a prize, you get to turn the Media Club into a special non-verbal show that we can sell across the world.
Excellent.
Come back with some deals. That'd be great. My thanks to both of you. How can people keep up with what you're doing? Charlotte?
Pressgazette.co.uk, and I'm on LinkedIn and Blue Sky, probably the best ones nowadays.
Excellent. Caroline?
You can follow me on X, Frost Reporter, and do tune in for the Radio Times Smart TV podcast. Available wherever you're consuming this. Thank you very much to both of you, and see you in the new year. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. And thanks to you for listening. Remember, we'd love to know about you too, just like the Press Gazette registration wall. You can volunteer your email address to us and you'll get a note from us each week. Just go to themediaclub.com, and give us your email address.
And if you'd like to nominate someone to be a member of the club, or you've got a story that we're not talking about, you can drop us an email, hello@themediaclub.com. That's hello@themediaclub.com. My name's Matt Deegan. The producer was Matt Hill. It was a Rethink audio production with video support from Podcast Discovery. I'll see you next year.